Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we'll be discussing a game between the Sharks and the Wild, in which the Sharks have won 2-0. So anyone who predicted the Sharks winning this game with their first shutout of the season without Erik Karlsson, Logan Couture, Tomas Hertl, Evander Kane, and with Martin Jones in net, I certainly commend you because I definitely didn't see this coming. Not only the Sharks getting the victory in this game, especially considering the Wild is in their first game with a new coach. They've already been pretty good in their past few games. You really didn't think that the Sharks would be able to get this one. Also, I should say, the Sharks are on the second half of a back-to-back, playing 2 games in less than 24 hours, considering this was a sort of afternoon game. And yet here we are with the Sharks having played a pretty solid defensive performance. Now, it's not really a surprise that the Sharks would default to a defensive performance when you consider that their top 3 forwards are out and one of their top 2 defensemen is also out. But it was quite impressive how they managed to more or less completely shut down the Wild. Now, the Wild did still manage close to 40 shots, if not 40 shots, but the shot clock didn't necessarily tell the story. Now, while the Sharks didn't get many great chances themselves, in fact, they didn't get any great chances at all, really. Their one goal from Dylan Gambrell that came in the third period was a pretty lucky bounce, in fact. They also didn't give all that much to the Wild, so Jones, a good game for him, a very good game you could also put, especially making some decent saves in the third period, but it wasn't a spectacular, monumental, stolen game from the side of Martin Jones, just a very solid defensive performance from the Sharks. Eventually, Melker Karlsson would get the empty netter to cap off the game, and as I said, the Sharks would get their first shutout of the season. So first thing to talk about would be Martin Jones as he finds himself back between the pipes here because of this back-to-back. His last game was a couple of weeks ago back against the Vancouver Canucks, and while Jones had a very good first period and second period in that game, he really fell apart in the third period. I was worried that would happen. Basically, as every minute passed, I was waiting for Jones to let in a bad goal, but that moment never came. He played a pretty solid game, and that will make it very interesting to see who gets the start on Monday. Will Dell come back in between the pipes as he was quite good against the Jets, or will Jones be rewarded for his shutout here tonight against the Wild? My bet, I would suspect Jones actually gets the call. If it was a 3-2 victory for Jones, I could see the reasoning of putting Dell back in, but because it is this first shutout of the season for the Sharks as a whole, Jones will likely get the call once more. Next, I'll talk about Brent Burns. Of course, a lot of the defensive duties fell on him in this game, considering Erik Karlsson is done for the rest of the season. This was something that Burns is not necessarily not used to, considering Erik Karlsson did arrive to the Sharks team last season, and really Burns prior to that was the main guy the Sharks looked towards. So Burns, of course, leading the team in ice time by a good amount, over 5 minutes more than the next closest player, above 27 minutes for him, and he did a very good job here tonight. Basically was the shutdown guy that the Sharks would look towards in more or less every single situation. And he was also the player who set up the goal, that Gambrell's goal, that would give the Sharks the only goal on a manned net in this entire game. So just an all-around solid game from Brent Burns, and we'll see if he really does step up into this increased role with Erik Karlsson out of the lineup for so long, well, for the rest of the season. Next, I'll talk about Barclay Goodrow. Now, he as well had a very good defensive game, but one thing I should point out is that there was no forward with more time on ice than Barclay Goodrow, who played over 20 minutes in this game, almost 3 minutes more than the closest forward, who, by the way, the second closest forward was none other than Melker Karlsson. Now, there were some power plays for the Minnesota Wild, which would explain why these two forwards did get some inflated ice time, but there were also a lot of power plays for the Sharks, and Goodrow and Karlsson didn't really get much opportunities, obviously, on those power plays. And so it shows so much trust that Bob Booner actually has in these two players who were given that time right at the end of the game, trying to kill off the 6-on-5. These two doing a very good job defensively. And we saw right at the end of the game, as I said, Melker Karlsson with the empty netter. This was a very unselfish play by Barclay Goodrow. It was a 2-on-0 basically towards the empty net after Goodrow made a great play at the blue line, and he ends up passing it to his, partner in crime when you consider the penalty kill. Melker Karlsson to get the goal for him. So nice play by Goodrow, and he had a very good game for the Sharks right now in the role as second line center. He's been very solid for the Sharks through the majority of the year, one of the more, you could say, consistent players, I guess, and hopefully he continues to play rather well for them. And finally, I'll talk about Evander Kane. Now, of course, Kane did not play in this game, but not due to injury like Couture, Hurdle, and Karlsson, but due to being suspended. As I said at the end of my Winnipeg Jets game, I suspected Kane would get a look from the league on this elbowing play to the head of Neil Pionk, and I'm not entirely surprised why he ended up getting these 3 games, but there was something. We saw Kane actually respond to the suspension by saying how he feels there's a lack of consistency with the Department of Player Safety, and I don't think anybody in the world disagrees with that. It's pretty clear that every time some sort of controversial play occurs in the game, it seems as though the Department of Player Safety decides to flip a coin to see, or at least flips a coin in situations where it's a player who isn't normally suspended. When it comes to someone like Evander Kane, they basically throw the book at him each and every time. But when it comes to a player who's not normally seen in a negative light like this, it seems as though they do flip a coin, or I guess the more common term for it is spin the wheel. And Kane just wants to see more consistency. I'm pretty sure every hockey fan wants to see some more consistency. I mean, we saw play just a few days earlier when Zdeno Chara, I believe, almost cross-checks the head of Brendan Gallagher in sort of an altercation between the two of them, and Zdeno Chara was only issued a $5,000 fine, which for Chara isn't really a big deal, and not get suspended. So you can definitely see how it goes one way or the other way. Kane certainly has a very good point when he brings this up, but that will do it for this review. The Sharks will be back in action on Monday as they will face off against the Florida Panthers. They have played the Panthers once already this season, and it did not go particularly well, to say the least, so the Sharks will be looking to have a bounce-back game. Now, historically against the Panthers, they haven't been very good, but if they can put up another defensive performance, though it will be more difficult against a much more offensively talented team like the Panthers, maybe the Sharks can sneak out another victory. Class dismissed.